What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and League of Legends patch 12.6 is coming. We'll quickly state that I have had somewhat of a long day and didn't get much sleep, so we'll see if the quality's up to par. But I did the prep work a few days beforehand, so it's just going to be the oration that, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, 12.6 is going to be the LCS playoff patch. Either 12.7 or 8 is going to be the MSI patch, so we are gearing up for even more pro-focused changes here. It's a pretty small patch with those considerations in mind. As you see, nerfs to Hecarim and Tryndamere, who are primarily pro-play problems, buffs to Azir, Darius, Jax, and Nidalee, who really don't see any pro-play, and to my knowledge, aren't doing all that well in solo queue, and we have data on that. We'll show that in a little bit. And then some cool system changes. Primarily, the big thing about this patch is changes to sustain. The overall amount of lifesteal and omnivamp is going down. We'll talk about that a bit as that goes on as well. Also, some changes to Illaoi and Rengar. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so first up, pretty easy stuff. Azir is getting more health growth to the tune of 13. Now, this does give him quite a lot of base health level 18. We're certainly getting into a world where Riot is definitely been inflating base stats. I can't remember the last time I have seen a champion lose level 18 stats, at least durability stats. I think there was one to Aurelia maybe a few months ago, but for the most part, champions are getting a lot tankier, and the old world of 2,000 health being fairly high for a mage is long gone. Now, to be fair, the idea of 2,000 max health is a little bit outdated. There were, like, back when Runes Reforged came out, Riot did compensation buffs as they ripped the runes out. They gave everyone functionally their default rune page back in base stats, and so mages, for example, got 12 health per level added just outright to the champions, which was 192 health, if my math is correct. It's close to that, 196, something around there. And so that meant, it was 196, yeah. Which meant, okay, well, 2,200 health was actually like the old 2,000. So Azir, in those terms was, below 2,000, which would have been the very top end for a mage. And now he's definitely above what mages used to have back in the day. Of course, itemization changes have happened since then. All kinds of things have changed since then. The types of rune page people changed. Bring has changed since then, but worth noting that, clearly the health in the game is power creeping. Now, that might be worth it. It might be okay, but, that is definitely happening. That overall health bars are getting bigger as a baseline in this game. Just as a commentary, that is what's happening. Good or bad, just happening. Anyway, as far as the health is concerned, it is some pretty meaningful health differences. So here you go. Here is how much health he's going to have before and after. This is before items, so if you're going to go for a Crown or an Everfrost, if you're going to go for a Demonic Embrace, if you're going to go for Rylays, that's going to add more health to you, so the number's going to be different, if you're going to go for builds like that. But if you're going Ludens or Liandry's into a Nashor's Tooth with Sork Shoes, and then you're going to get a Void Staff or a Death Cap, then here are your numbers, right? So either way, it is a pretty meaningful amount of bonus health. Obviously, he will be a lot less assassinatable. Worth noting that even though it is a scaling health change, you actually get a solid, 1.5–2% bonus health pretty early on. So you actually do feel the buff pretty quickly, ultimately. Again, a Doran's Wing adds some flat that, is going to be shared across all the builds, but kind of worth noting. Okay. Next up, we have Darius. So Darius, one more thing. Here's Azir's overall win rate. Now, I want to point out this is, I believe it's just on the most recent patch. So just on across all the 12.5 games. That includes the 12.5B, by the way. And it is for all elos. It is not looking at high elo only. It's looking for just, across all players, across average players. Azir is clearly not good. Now he clearly scales, right? His win rate goes up with time from 42 to 44, 45 to 57. His average win rate across all those games was just his win rate across just playing League of Legends, 45.4. So, not the strongest champion, certainly. Could use the buff. He's going to be more of a scaling pick, right? He's going to be more durable in late-game team fights. His lane bully ability isn't going anywhere. This will tend to be a good change in terms of influencing solo queue versus pro play. In general, I will maintain that scaling base stat increases will tend to help general players more than it's going to help pros. And early game, on kind of a similar point, tends to be a bit pro skewed as well. And so, if you don't help Azir's laning phase, you don't help his early lane pressure, which is pretty pro focused and that can be pretty valuable as well. Overall, going to be a relatively small change. I mean, we're not going to see a 50% win rate in average elo by any means, but it is a buff. So here's Darius. Darius is getting a pretty simple change of getting 25, 50, 75 extra damage on the R. Now it's worth pointing out that when you get all 5 stacks of your passive, this damage doubles and becomes true damage. But also, you get 5 stacks of your passive, meaning you get a bunch of bonus AD, which isn't going anywhere. So here is the overall damage of Darius ult. Looking at an assumed like average bonus AD buy, just like how much he's going to kind of generally have across the game. And also using a fully stacked passive as the baseline. So this actually accounts for buying items in most cases and having a 5-stack passive in most cases. So if you are poorer or you don't fully stack your passive, these percentages are going to be actually higher. But for a realistic doing well case, this will be the numbers. And it's up pretty meaningfully. 25 to 75, you think with an ability that, has a big bonus AD ratio attached, that you're going to have a bunch of bonus AD on anyway. Still a pretty meaningful set of numbers here. So this is a meaningful buff. Certainly, the ult will do some very solid damage. I mean, 1257 base true damage on the ulti is a lot, it turns out. It's only up, again, by 150, but that can matter. So yeah, pretty big ups here for Darius. Is it going to be a really big deal? I mean, we can see he tends to lose win rate with game time, right? 51 for surrenders below 20 minutes. And then, 49, 48, 48, 48. Overall win rate, sub 49. For a champion that tends to be a lower elo pub stomper, the resting average win rate being below 50 means Darius definitely a little bit weak. I didn't investigate if people are building him wrong, if it's the wrong rune choices or wrong item choices. There probably is some of that, but that's also true for a lot of champions. So it's not always a important cry. Either way, though, obviously pretty meaningful buff to Darius, although of note that it's actually relatively flat, even though obviously like in pure numbers, the number is, like plus 25 becomes plus 75. The fact that we're counting for how much AD you're going to build, the base damage, all that stuff, percentage-wise is not going to move all that much, right? It's like about 13, 14% at all points in time. That's kind of the point here. Alrighty, next up we have Hecarim. Hecarim is absolutely pretty much certifiably the number 1 jungler in pro play right now. He's doing reasonably well in solo queue. I think it's good that they are nerfing mostly base damages, by the way. I think Hecarim ideally lives in a world where his best build is fighter and the off build is tank, and it's like several win rate lower, like win percentage lower. That's to me what is ideal for Hecarim, is that like, to put it into other terms, I think anything within about 3% win rate of, wherever your focal point or point of inflection or reference, there we go, reference. Anything within 3% of your reference is going to be roughly playable, I think. 2 to 3%, whatever, like around there is like going to be what's in the realm of playable. If we're not kind of for things like champion mastery and whatnot, where like that can obviously swing wildly, right? Like champion mastery is going to move a champion by 10% win rate sometimes. Matchups move it by 10% win rate sometimes. So, but in a sort of a resting state, a item build or a rune choice being within about 2%, 3% is, to me, what is within the realm of reasonable, where there are going to be the occasional case where you're like, well, fighter Hecarim on average is better. However, we already picked Hecarim, and we really, 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 really need frontline. Well, I wouldn't normally do this. It's wrong in almost all games. But in this case, tank Hecarim makes sense. Like, that's to me where tank Hecarim should exist. Not, well, we first pick Hecarim and we're just always going to go chem tank. Like, that to me is not where I think this champion's supposed to live. Like, this champion is clearly meant to be a damage champion. He's meant to be a fighter, yeah, or a diver specifically, right? But like divers, like Vi, should be building Trinity Force and Death Dance and GA and like actually trying to slap people. So I think lowering base damages pushes you in that direction, because if you don't build any bonus AD, you don't get a whole lot back. So damage is down by up to 28 at max rank, 7 per rank up here. Devastating charge damage down by 0 to 20 at minimum, or 0 to 40 at maximum. So here's Hecarim's overall data. He is relatively flat as a champion. His win rate is, very, very, 50%, plus minus 1% the entire time. So in the past, I remember that Hecarim used to be a champion who fell off with game time. There have been enough changes to him since I've last looked at that data like closely that he's clearly changed enough that he's actually flat relative to the average jungler in the metagame. Now, the idea of falling off and scaling up and whatnot is always going to be relative to the metagame. Like, if all anyone plays right now is Xin Zhao and Lee Sin, and these are champions who fall off over time, I don't know if they are, I'm just saying, like, if that's true, Trundle, I think, is what champion who actually falls off. Then, oh, well, by Hecarim not falling off as hard, he's going to gain win rate with game time, even though in isolation he actually falls off. But if no one plays Diana, and no one plays Karthus, and no one plays Evelynn, and those just aren't in the pool, well, if there's no scaling picks being played in solo queue on average, which maybe not true, but if, then you don't have anyone to make the non-scaling champions non-scale. Instead, now they're the baseline, and, anyway. Hecarim Q, again, down pretty flat amounts of damage. I am doing this as far as tank Hecarim's concerned because, of course, we could do it for fighter Hecarim, but I said, okay, well, for nerfing the tank builds, how hard is it being nerfed? And again, pretty meaningfully, right? You're going to notice the clear speed differences pretty quickly. You're going to notice the team fight damage output differences pretty quickly. Obviously, from level 8s and onward, you get less burst damage from the E. So yeah, it does matter. It does really matter. So pretty meaningful stuff there. As far as this is concerned, by the way, because of how the damage is calculated, it is, I believe, a Hecarim auto attack plus the charge. So 340 total damage on a charge becomes 300 total damage on the charge, which is like, still pretty high for a spell. But there's the math. And yeah, overall, clearly like a reasonable champion for most players in solo queue. But again, here's where we are, where he's overtaking pro play. Next up, small changes to Illaoi, Leap of Faith, and some bug fixes. So Leap of Faith now cast with Illaoi facing towards her cursor, which basically spawns tentacles there instead of on her. So I think before she would like either jump towards the nearest champion, or I forget what she would do if she'd jump in place, or whatever she was facing already. But now you can kind of like push the tentacles forward a little bit, which is, I think, generally going to be a positive for her. We've got some bug fixes. So while attacking a vessel, they will now actually slam quickly. So, right, fast tentacle slams seems positive. Spell queuing added to W and R, so you can buffer them when casting them. Pretty pog. So W into Q and R into Q, I assume. You can W into Q and R into Q is basically the thing, or W into E or whatever. So that'll help. That's just going to be like a mechanical dub. Correct range into our basic attacks. That's nice. Tentacle stance on base gates. Okay. Vessels don't give CS. Fine. And Tentacle Smash and Test of Spirit are now visible to enemy champions when cast from fog. Okay. Well, I mean, that obviously was usable, right? Undodgeable skill shots and whatnot. But, I mean, this feels like a reasonable change, to be honest. I think, well, I wish Riot would be more consistent about particles not displaying when cast from fog. Like, feels kind of rough. But at least they're doing some of it, so that's good. And I think these things are pretty solid as well. So, cool stuff. Good job, Illaoi. Next up is Jax. So Jax is gaining a pretty solid 22 base health, so better early game. He's now one of very few champions who actually crest more than 600 health at level 1. This used to be a rarity. It is less so now. Again, base stats are going up in League of Legends over time. Just, that's just true. I'm not really adding a lot of commentary here because I'm not sure how I feel about it. And then a simple 10 base damage up on Empower. So we can take a look at Jax overall as we flashbang ourselves consistently. Jax definitely scales with game time, right? 46% win rate in sub 20-minute surrenders, up to 52 in the long, I think it's 35 plus or 40 plus. I forget which. I think it's 35 to 40 is that bracket at 52. So, obviously, on average, for the average player, not the best champion, but like clearly playable, right? But yeah, here's what 22 health does for you, and it's going to be 4% more health in the early game, less so in the late game. Yes, it is kind of weird that Azir has more health than Jax, but also Jax has Counter Strike and higher armor and MR growth, and his R for armor and MR. I do believe that champions should scale health, armor, and MR in somewhat more equal amounts, so that health bars are a little bit more honest to the actual champion's durability. It's a really minor thing, but I just think it would be kind of nice. Either way, again, not a very, very big deal, but an early game focus buff here for the early durability. The 10 damage on W, this is his, I believe this is his, this is the W spell, of course. It's ranked first most commonly. This is his base AD and his common AD growth, I believe, as well. If I'm looking at the numbers, yeah, it is his common AD purchases as well on top. So, yeah. I mean, still decent damage on how much damage a W hit will give you. Keep in mind, it is an attack reset, so it really is providing quite a lot in pretty much every single time. And yeah, buffs to Jax, but primarily early game focused buffs to Jax, which are going to flatten out that win rate graph a little bit, right? He'll gain 1 or 2% in the early game. The 52 at the end game is barely going to move, but like it'll be a little bit flatter, and he'll be a bit stronger. Cool stuff. Next up is Nidalee. Definitely haven't seen a lot of Nidalee. We saw her in LCK playoffs pretty recently. But another champion who is, I believe, really, really early game skewed. And also really, really high MMR skewed. So lower mana costs, just flat 10 mana off of Bushwhack, 0 to 20 off of Primal Surge, which I believe is maxed second. Extra cast range is kind of nice. That's always going to be some power. And Pounce has bigger radius, which will help knock down things like wolves and raptors. And it adds a little bit of consistency in team fights as well, of course. But just, again, makes the jungle clear a little bit better, which is kind of nice. There are going to be some cases where you're going to miss damage. So it's just, free benefit there. And then you can see that her win rate falls off really, really, really hard. If it's a 20-minute surrender, Nidalee's on the winning team more often than not. But otherwise, she's on the losing team on average. Her win rate is not complete crap, by the way. Like Nidalee being at 47.5 is higher than she has been when she's had pro play before. So, I would say that Riot's done a really good job of putting Nidalee into a spot where she's actually playable for most human beings, which is pretty solid because she hadn't been before. And so here's another tap. Lower mana costs, again, healing range, W radius. These aren't gigantic changes. It's not going to be 2.5% win rate, but it'll bump her up a little bit for the average players. It's the kind of thing where pro players go, should we try this? Maybe. Heal spam's good. And overall, yeah, I think this is pretty good set of changes in terms of trying to target the right things, of making her work well in other contexts, and then just pro play, then just ultra high elo, where it's all about early game and forcing surrenders and whatnot. So it seems like a good change. Next up is Rengar, who's getting a whole bunch of updates. So let's see. Rengar's next leap will grant 1 ferocity instead of when he has 0, but upon losing all ferocity stacks before his next leap. So like, if you run out of stacks, go into brush, cast a bunch of spells, stack up, and then leap, that leap will not give 1 ferocity. So pretty cool change, right? So instead of when he has 0, but last time he's hit 0. So okay, more often will he gain ferocity. That's power up. That's pretty strong. You can now leap out of camouflage consistently rather than in a variable timer. It is erring on the low side of the average, but it has been slightly increased. So, okay, can't cheat out for quite as long, but a little bit more distance. I assume this is meant to be power neutral, but also because Z is good, so that's good stuff. Now has a Ferocity resource bar that indicates how much Ferocity he currently has. Stacks generated by leaps with different colors, so you know if you'll gain Ferocity on the next leap. Oh, that's interesting. That's a cool change. So that's neat. That's great. Cool beans there. Fall off after 10 seconds out of combat instead of 8. And then Bone Tooth Necklace is twice as forgiving in terms of damage enemy champions getting the kill from someone else. So gets all those stacks a little bit more easily. So these are all pretty much just strict buffs. This one is probably more neutral, but basically everything else here is strictly a buff to the champion. Seems pretty good. Next up is Savagery. Now applies against towers. No longer applies against plants, so you won't lose Savagery against a plant. That was one thing that people were doing, was they were using their Q. They were leaping and queuing, I think, a blast plant to start the first jungle clear, and that's going away. You can still leap out of brush, but you can also leap out of brush like later by just like leaping at any point during the first camp. And again, you're not going to get a stack after using Savagery on the plant before you have it happen. So this is going to slightly lower his. It's going to worsen his jungle clear for the very, very early clear, because again, you're going to be 1 point down, just like factually true. Oh well. Next thing I want to do, though, is I think a very interesting change. And I like this change actually quite a lot. This actually, I would say, opens up crit builds more for Rengar. It makes them, I would say, more consistent, which is, I think, just overall a win for the game. But the Q basic attack is now counts as a critical strike instead of regular crit strike damage. Each 1% chance adds not quite crit chance as damage. However, if it increases the empowered attack damage by 0.6%, it probably means that the Q base damage crits, which almost nothing in the game outside of Zeri Q that I can think of crits. So even though it is a lower crit damage ratio by being this instead of 0.75 and then 1.25 with IE, this is still like, it's probably applying to the base damage of Q. It probably won't apply to things like Sheen. I would just guess in general it won't do that, but This is pretty exciting, and I think is a really positive thing. It always counts the crit, and it just rolls in the crit chance into crit damage. I think it's a pretty cool thing, so I like this change a lot. Bola Strike is now thrown instantly during leap, no cast time, so easy to buffer and just get your spells ready, no problem. And now grants True Sight and Normal Vision, 150 units around the first enemy hit for 2 seconds. So now if you hit a Kali, boom, you get vision on a Kali. So not that we see a ton of her, but like that's pretty neat. This is a pretty meaningful update. That's a cool dub, right? And then now grants not only True Sight, but normal vision 100 units around the nearest enemy. So if people are hugging that person, you now can see them as well. So again, several buffs here to Rengar. I believe I didn't include his win rate data. Sorry about that. But these all look really, really nice, and this is really cool. And I am glad actually that there has been a light touch in making him a little bit easier to play, and not having these weird optimizations around, oh, I always have to leap first. I should queue plants before I start my jungle clear. Like, these are things that I think are worth getting rid of, and I think it's some really good design work. So I'm really big fan of these changes, and that's really cool. Next up is Tryndamere. So CDR for crits on Spinning Slash has been cut down by 1/4. So 1 becomes 0.75, 2 becomes 1.5. This is, I would say, pretty meaningful ultimately, because it's going to add, in a lot of cases, 1 or 2 extra autos required to get your Spinning Slash back. That's definitely pretty meaningful. I know there was some discussion around should they remove or should they have the CDR scale down with ability haste, but the call was made, and I think reasonably so, that no, having Trynd opt into haste is interesting and kind of compelling. And so the fact that he even builds Nagori Quick Blades is a positive, because it's a synergistic item, and that's a cool thing. So, having a 30 haste crit item is good for him. Dying Rage is getting a 20-second longer cooldown at rank 1, 20, and then 10, and then 0. It's worth noting that for what I have personally seen, this might not be the most common, but from I have personally seen from pro play, the most common Tryndamere ultimate rank up was actually leaving it until level 13, and then choosing the ult over W as the rank up. That 10 seconds off the ult cooldown was better than the W rank up. That might be an uncommon version of the build. I don't know, but I know that I'd seen it in pro play, and so it's the one that I'm referencing here. With this in mind, it is a nerf 1 through 10. It is equal at 11 and 12. It is once again a nerf 13, 14, 15, as the old build would have ranked it a second time at this point. Ultimately, I do believe that you will rank this at 11 and 16 in the new build. 20 seconds, I think, is enough to influence the cooldown. Maybe you still wait to 13. Maybe you don't do it at 11. I'm not sure, but there's a real possibility there. Keep it in mind. And we can see Tryndamere, by the way, is an early game champion. This is why, by the way, we see Trynd in pro play. And it's absurdly predictable, right? How many times we have, I talked about this in the patch rundown, how many times is shock made by the game designers? Early game is like the only thing pros care about. Probably wrongly so, but here we are, where of all champions, Tryndamere gets consistent pro play. The champ that does nothing but provide raw DPS, has a ton of hard counters in lane that no one's willing to play. And it's because Tryndamere is a lane bully who falls off. By the way, Tryndamere is a lane bully who falls off. If you can go equal to Tryndamere and just chill and not give him first blood and find a way to not give him your entire tower, Tryndamere will fall off and you will outscale him. In average elo, yeah, he's relatively balanced, 49.7% win rate. I'm sure there's optimizations that like regular players are missing, but like so are their opponents, so who cares? It's a moot point. But like, turns out the most lane dominant top laner is a pro mainstay. Who could have seen this coming? Wow, it's like pros really overvalue the laning phase. And I will say, maybe it's not overvalue. Maybe they just really value it, and pro play really is about early game domination. Usually when I see a team get outdrafted, it's when they focus entirely on early game and good lane matches and go, oh, our team fighting's bad. Oh, late game matters. Oh, we lost. Like, that happens often enough that I'm pretty sure pro play in general somewhat overvalues early game. Unsurprisingly, Tryndamere with a 58% unanimous surrender win rate is a pro play champion. Shocking. This won't affect that in pretty much many ways. Obviously, you can try to go after him more. Level 6 through 10, you've got a longer window to punish him with ulti being down. I mean, 130 is actually a meaningful ult cooldown. This is in the realm of like, okay, you're actually going to feel this, so this will be helpful. But yeah, not really affecting his early game that much overall. Some, to be clear, but not a ton. Alrighty, next up we got big updates to items. Now I did not do gold efficiency item tables for these because for the most part it's kind of fraudulent to measure it because Vamp Scepter is going down in value. So the price of like the gold value of 1% lifesteal went up, which is like obviously a little bit fraudulent. So there's not really a reason to go after this. Overall though, Immortal Shield Bow lost 2% lifesteal. In recompense, it gained 0 to 50 health off the shield. My understanding is the shield is in fact flat for the first 8 to 9 levels of the game, maybe up to 10, I'm not sure. So it says level 1 to 18. I mean, it's really 10 to 18 roughly, as far as I recall anyway. So you're not actually getting, 25 of this health from the moment you buy the item. I'm pretty sure that one, I haven't double checked this one, but I'm pretty sure Shield Bow in fact works that way. So, again, it's actually 0 to 50 more health than the shield. And then also the mythic passive, is up by 20 health per item. So, again, up to 50 health from the shield, up to 20, 40, 60, and even ultra late game 80 more health than the shield bow. But of course less early lifesteal, only 8%. Okay, Blade of the Ruined King nerfed 8% only. Well, gonna be less of a good rush item now. Vampiric Scepter only 8%. What is what I mentioned, right? The efficiency of that stat is going up because it's getting nerfed. It's what makes using gold efficiency always a kind of weird stat because of how it's derived. Whatever, moving on. Further changes to some runes. Ravenous Hunter is dead, and I am so incredibly happy about this. I think both Ravenous Hunter, Fleet Footwork's Heal, and Legend Bloodline should all not exist in the game. I think stats that exist really rarely, such as Lifesteal, and to be honest, such as Mana, should be intentionally opted into via the item system. I don't like when items are really discrete bits of power. You only buy on average 3 items a game plus boots, or at least intend to buy your 3rd item if you're on a losing team and you lose too fast. So you only make 3 item slot choices, and invalidating lifesteal is one of the item slot choices because you have Ravenous Hunter or because you have Legend Bloodline, when lifesteal is meant to be a bit special. I think, to me, I just really dislike it. So I am very glad Ravenous is removed on a design level. It was interesting because it was way too popular for its power level. I don't think it was OP, to be clear. I think it was balanced to a state where it was balanced. I think the tuning was reached well. But everyone just always picked it, so it crushed choices in rune pages. And it usually meant that you didn't bother buying lifesteal items, so it also crushed choices in itemization, which both those things are bad, right? So I am very glad, again, that Ravenous Hunter is gone. Now, Treasure Hunter is really, really interesting. So Treasure Hunter is 70 gold for a Bounty Hunter stack, then 90, then 110, then 130, and then 150. So 550 gold, if my math is correct. I, for some reason, didn't put any numbers down because I'm stupid, but 550 gold. Now, I want to point out that, of course, I believe Ravenous Hunter did have 0 stack stats. I think Relentless Hunter had 0 stack stats, and I think Ingenious Hunter had 0 stack stats. So Treasure Hunter is definitely more of a scaling rune because it does literally nothing from level 1, whereas Ravenous at least does something. 1% Omni Vamp is not a lot, but it's 0.5 health per auto attack in lane, and that can add up theoretically. Treasure Hunter does literally nothing, and thus can't add up, right? There is no world in which Treasure Hunter does anything at level 1 for you. Obviously, your invades can matter, of course. Yes, sure, right? You get a Pentakill level 1, you get 550 extra gold. Yeah, of course, right? That exists and is probably more powerful than a 5-stack Ravenous would be in lane. Anyways, move on. The point I want to say, though, is if you want to try to gold efficiency this rune versus other runes, that's going to be a bad look. So take a sip. What it comes down to is all items that you buy are better than their gold value in stats. Not only are items, basically every item you ever buy, more than 100% gold efficient, so you turn gold into stats at a better than 100% rate. I mean, Longsword is efficient, and then Pickaxe is more than that, and BF Sword is more than that. Amp Tome is efficient, and then Blasting Wand is more than that, and NLR is more than that. Fiendish Codex is more than that. Right? Ruby Crystal is gold efficient, and then Giant's Belt is more than that, right? Even from basic ass components, items are more efficient than, I mean, basic, like just individual pieces, items are more efficient than their gold values. Also, think about it. Let's say I just give you 5 AD. Well, if you're playing Yasuo, great. You got 175 gold worth of attack damage. If you're playing Annie, no one cares. That's not worth 175 gold to you. But if you gave Yasuo 175 gold, he might hit his shield bow combined. He might hit his boots combined. Annie might finish Death Cap or whatever. These are all better uses of gold than just here's your Infernal or Mountain Drake sources of stats. One thing that I've managed to inflict upon the LCS casting team is just kind of spitting out rough gold values of dragons and rough gold values of dragon souls. And in so doing, I'm accounting for the fact that I'm discounting their stats. Like, I know about how much AD and Infernal Drake gives the team, and which of those champions actually use the AD, and then which champions actually use the AP, and then discounting it to some degree, and then saying, here's what number we're going to give. A Dragon Soul is worth 4,000 gold. So that when you see a 4,000 gold lead in a Dragon Soul, the Sheen damage, whatnot, like all that stuff, I'm actually confident that that's about the power level, right? Because the other team is spending 4,000 gold in finishing good items and buying ideal stats. So these things end up being pretty equivalent. Yes, that means in a perfect game where everything the dragons give you and everything the soul gives you is perfect for all your champions, it will in fact be worth more than that. But people already talk about that, and that discussion's already had, so that's fine. In an average game, it's worth 4,000 gold. In an ideal game, it's 7,000 gold. Okay, cool. People already talked about that, right? So it's fine. And so I have, somewhat intentionally misled people into an appropriate value for those stats. Treasure Hunter, again, to circle back to it, so you can, assuming you are not bad at itemization, and to be fair, people still buy Lord Dominic's second and third, and they still buy Voidstaff second, so people are bad at itemization, But assuming you're good at itemization, and to be fair, most solo queue players are not. Like, Voidstaff second and LDR second pick rates are like under 10%, so good job, y'all. You're not getting burned by pro play. I'm proud of you. Good job. You're buying good items for the most part. You're literally smarter than pro players for your itemization choices. I mean, like, you watch the video right now. You are smarter than most pro players in your itemization choices. I want you to pat yourself on the back for not buying a damn Voidstaff second in any of your games. It's trash. So, continue to not buy your Voidstaff second. Go build your Cosmic Drive. Go build your Lich Bane. Go build your Phantom Dancers and Storm Razors. And let's keep going. So it looks like a really cool rune. I want to say, though, also, just to circle back one more thing. The design of this rune is very pog. I love the idea of this rune. I think the design of it being increasingly more gold for more stacks, so it's not just instantly level 1 snowball, but it can kind of carry on. I think that's a really smart tuning lever, and it's like sort of shape to the rune. Like, love this rune. Weirdly enough, we actually go back to healing changes. Treasure Hunter was a healing change because Ravenous went away, but Fleet Footwork has reduced healing. Now, interestingly enough, just because of the sort of like, I don't want to say haphazard, that's like a bit too aggressive, but because the number's chosen, here is AD for an average AD builder, and here's AP for an average AP builder. So because the ratio went down by 0.1 each, 0.4 became 0.3, and then 0.3 became 0.2, this hurts more on an AP champion. So indeed, you can see AP champions lost 14 to 60% healing, and AD champions lost 9 to 11% healing. I don't think it was meant to be nerfed for AP champs more than AD champs. Maybe it actually was, in which case, fair point. If it was meant to be nerfed for AP champions, then here's what you've got, right? And then it's totally reasonable. I don't expect that to be the case, so it is unfortunately more nerfed for AP champions. Oh well. Final change is Legend Bloodline is going down, down, down. Was in an earlier round, but now it is a total of 6% lifesteal instead of 9% lifesteal at 15 stacks. That is pretty meaningful. That is 3% lifesteal down. And keep in mind that up until you get to max stacks, it's just a strict nerf. And then once you reach max stacks, you get, boom, here's 100 max HP. So you get 100 max HP here on Legend Bloodline. You get up to 50 more shielding here. You get another 20 health per mythic passive here. So like if you were doing a Legend Bloodline shield bow kind of build, now I do enjoy the fact that like, okay, I'm already in, I mean, here's like, it's a kind of weird thing actually. It feels a very little bit muddy. Legend Bloodline competes with Legend Alacrity and Legend Tenacity. Alacrity is clearly the most damaging one. Okay, sure, no problem. Good design. It has a very, very obvious goal there. Legend Bloodline gave you Lifesteal, which is a way to gain durability. And then not only do you get Lifesteal, but when you fully stack it out, you get 100 max health, which makes you also better against getting bursted out and getting caught out. And it's actually pretty solid. This, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's actually pretty decent amount of health. Legend Tenacity kind of does a similar thing. Like health and tenacity serve fairly similar purposes. Like real talk, which would you rather have against a Syndra? 30 tenacity or 100 HP? Because getting out of the stun matters, and surviving the ult matters. If you know you're against Syndra, which would you prefer? I don't know. I think the answer is I don't know. And that's kind of too bad, right? That like, yeah, there's theoretically a choice here, but like it's like the way I view it is I don't mind having hard choices, but I guess I want the results of the choices to be obvious. Like if I'm going to choose between, you know, let's say going Shield Bow first and Collector first, which I think are both defensible options on Samira, for example. Collector underpurchased on Samira, by the way. I think it's a great first item for several of these assassins, but we're going to move on. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to sacrifice durability for way more damage. I don't know which one's better, but I'm clearly picking a side. I'm clearly picking a style. Picking Gale versus Kraken on an 80 carry in general. Like, I don't know which one's going to be better, but like, I'm clearly picking DPS versus mobility and a touch of burst, maybe chase, right? But like, very clearly, Kraken Slayer is the DPS option. I don't know which one's better, but like, you know, they're doing different things. Legend Bloodline, Legend Tenacity feel like they're doing relatively similar things there. Well, I kind of want to survive more. Now, they do survive in different ways, and that's pretty valid, and that's, you know, that's there. And certainly in a lot of cases, like, oh, I'm against chip damage and poke, I need to go Bloodline is pretty fair. And, oh, I'm against a Rammus, I'm going to go Tenacity is pretty fair. Like, there are many cases where the choice is much more obvious. That's actually true. There are cases where the choice is actually obvious. And maybe the case of like, well, Syndra is a burst damage champion who stuns is more the edge case, and I'm just kind of being angsty over nothing. That might be true as well, to be honest. So it's not, again, I'm not saying this is like a horrible idea. It does fit the idea of this item, right? The idea is more health by hitting things, by doing this. It all makes some sense. I want to point out this has still synergy with Overshield because you get 10% of your max HP on that shield as Overshield. So this actually adds 110 if you're going to run Overheal. So Legend Bloodline Overheal strat, certainly still there, certainly possible, and actually arguably a little bit better. So no big complaints here. The one thing I will say is that I wrote numbers down. Technically, so pre-nerf, the value of 3% lifesteal was 112.5 gold. The value of 100 HP is 266.7 gold. Now, again, you feel this 112.5 the entire time. I mean, first it's 0, but as you stack, I guess you don't really get the 112.5, but like, you're down 60 gold, you're down 70 gold, you're down 80 gold, you're down 90 gold, and then max stat comes in, and boom, you're up 150. Now, you have to actually assume that you value that much health, that much gold. That's also not true. I guess the final tangent I'll go down is that health is most efficiently purchased early on. It is part of why I heavily recommend Warmog's armor as a second item, because it outperforms absolutely everything in terms of surviving an enemy champion. If you're playing a tank, you've probably got tank boots, and you've got a tank mythic. So you've actually got like 110 armor anyway, and you've got like 90 MR anyway. So guess what? Just get some health next, because you're functionally devaluing any further armor or MR by half, because you already got plus 100 in that stat, basically. But if you're buying Warmog's second item, you're like level 10 with like a 350 health mythic. You don't have much health yet. Warmogs. Buy a Warmogs. Buy a Warmogs. Warmogs is, I will say, the single most under-purchased item in League of Legends, just ahead of Demonic Embrace. I think those are probably the top two. Maybe Locket's third, but Locket's getting a lot of play in Pro, so it's probably not third place. But those are the ones. I will say, buy more Warmogs, buy more Demonic Embraces. Early health is very PogChamp, and Bludgeon Bloodline only gives 100 HP at the end of the stack. Like, if every stack gave you, 0.4% lifesteal and 5 health, this would be a stronger rune overall, actually, right? If it worked like Shieldbow does, where it just kind of stacks up health for you as you get mythic passes and whatnot. This would be an overall stronger rune despite the max health being lower at the end. That doesn't matter. 15 stacks takes a while. It's 15 takedowns, or, a lot of CS. I think it's, 40 CS for a stack, something like that. Make sure you're tagging dragons and other epic monsters to get assist credit. That'll give you a stack. The enemy team is killing dragon. Just hit it with a skill shot. Go miss shot the thing. When they kill it, you get a Legend Bloodline stack. Congratulations. Pretty powerful stuff there. So that's it for the patch rundown. I am not going to run a TLDR. It wasn't that long of a rundown. Yeah, it's 40 minutes, but it's going to be time-stamped. People can kind of skip through. I appreciate you all so much for watching and tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Ring the bell, maybe. I appreciate y'all. See you later. Bye.